Money is an essential aspect of life, and for some, it can be a constant struggle to make ends meet. In an effort to make money, people will often resort to desperate measures. From participating in market research, to selling candy door to door as a fraud, to even sleeping with an older person, people have done it all in the name of money. This video, edited by our youngest, will delve into the most desperate things that people on Reddit have ever done for money, and what they learned from their experiences. Tasting Devil's Underpants. Someone participated in market research for a new beer, despite the terrible taste. They were left wondering if it was market research or a psychological experiment. Starved and Wired. Another person participated in a food study where they were unable to eat for a day, had a tube put down their throat, and lay there for 6 hours as liquids were pumped in and out of their stomach. The pay was decent, but the experience was unpleasant. Fundraiser Scam. When unemployed, someone bought a large amount of candy from Costco and went door to door selling it, pretending it was for a church youth group. They made a profit and were able to pay rent that month, but felt guilty about their deception. Naked for Art. An undergraduate student posed naked for art classes, and was offered a private session by a graduate student artist. They initially thought it was for sex, but the artist only wanted them to pose. The experience was challenging, but the pay was substantial and the artist was gracious. They learned that they would be willing to engage in sex acts for money under certain circumstances. Wishing Well Quarters. A child, with a mother facing homelessness, dove into a wishing well to collect quarters for a vending machine. The memory was surreal, but the act was a necessary one to survive. 3 days no sleep. Someone participated in a sleep study, wired up to electrodes, monitoring responses, and learned they cannot go without sleep for 2 days in a row. Dumb surveys. Someone took part in surveys for small pay, but found it not worth the time wasted. Slept with Landlady. Someone slept with their 64-year-old landlady to avoid homelessness, but felt guilty about the act. Holding sign. Someone took a job holding a sign at an intersection. However, it was a local tradition to bully those doing this job by throwing food items like milkshakes and slushies at them. The individual describes the experience as difficult and uncomfortable, but they continued to do it for the money. Surviving hunger with theft. Someone else talked about the desperate measures they took to put food on the table. They worked at a Hampton Inn and with very little money, they and their sister were struggling to afford food. To make ends meet, they began stealing small items from work like danishes, peanut butter and jam cups, and commercial packs of coffee to bring home. They knew the owner was onto them, but they were willing to take the risk to feed themselves. It was a rough year, but eventually, their mother came to visit and helped them stock up on food, which they were still eating a year later. Marriage from financial struggles. Someone else talked about the desperate measure they took to make sure they could afford a date. They were broke and had a date in hours, but the only way they could afford to go was to dig through their car, their parents' cars, their sisters' cars, and even their couches looking for coins. They also had a partial used gift card that they sold for practically nothing. It was a close call, but they had just enough to cover themselves and the date ended up splitting the bill. The date went well and they ended up getting married. Heartbreak for financial gain. Someone shared a story about the desperate measure they took when they needed money. They pawned some handmade jewelry that was passed down to them from someone very special. They got paid for the pawned items less than 2 weeks later, but when they went back to retrieve them, the jewelry was missing. They never got over the loss of that special jewelry and it still makes them sad that they never got to wear it for something special. Sacrificing dignity for money. Someone else talked about the desperate measure they took to make money while in university. They signed up as a lab rat for various studies, one of which involved staying awake for over 30 hours in a room with no sunlight, communication, or anything else that might give them a sense of time. Among the blood and urine tests, they also had to keep a thermometer in their rectum the entire time. Despite the uncomfortable and undignified experience, they took the study because $1,400 was $1,400. Risking safety for money. Someone shared a story about the desperate measure they took for money by digging under a Chinese restaurant without permits or shoring. They were tasked with getting to a clogged grease trap and pulled and replaced hundreds of fluorescent ballasts without safety gear. This was a dangerous job, and it was clear that the safety of the workers was not a priority, but they needed the money. Alcoholism and financial control. Someone shared a story about the desperate measure they took to control their drinking. They never sold blood to buy alcohol, but there was a time when they would donate blood every Friday night in order to require less alcohol. However, it's worth noting that the body doesn't replenish red blood cells that quickly, so it's possible that they were donating plasma instead.